the moment that I read the executive order that Trump just put out on the Make America Healthy Again Commission, honestly, I froze. My heart dropped and my just entire body went into fight and flight because there was this section that we'll be talking about that I'm sure a lot of you already have seen, that it talks about assessing the threat of medication for mental health. And that's terrifying. That being said, I'm in a lot more of a regulated space now to actually be able to talk about what this whole document is actually saying. And I hope that this gives you some understanding of what it's talking about, where there's a lot of misdirection and places where it's basically just propaganda, and then also what are some future steps we can take. So if you are listening to this on the podcast, you cannot see my very messy desk, but lately it's been quite messy because I am, again, still pretty unregulated, and also maybe TMI, but I'm like in my luteal phase right now. And that is also when our ADHD symptoms tend to just get exacerbated. And so it's just like not a great time for me, but whatever, we are working through it. But again, you can't see it, but this is a diffuser like through pumice stone, and it's so wonderful. I've been like having lavender on tap. But yeah, my anxiety has been pretty much through the roof. And I'm sure a lot of you also feel the same way. So let's talk about this, what it is actually saying and what we can do. So, all right. So on February 13th, 2025, President Trump in the U.S. just made an executive order, as he's been doing wildly for a lot, called Establishing the President's Make America Healthy Again Commission. And this is where I want us to be critical, yet understanding what is going on. Because when we look at it, it's a great idea, right? We love this. We want to make America healthy. Like, that is my goal. That is the goal of all these health scientists and all of the people who learn about public health and what we want to do, and all the dietitians. And when we take a second look at it, that's where we see it is propaganda, because we know all of this. And it's working to undermine people with mental health conditions. It's working to undermine people who have chronic health conditions, and putting all the pressure onto them instead of putting the pressure onto the actual reasons why we are having these issues, which is, by the way, not our food. It's mainly the fact that people in the States are overworked, underpaid, don't have access to healthcare, or healthcare that isn't crippling. And then also the fact that we, in general, are way too stressed as a nation for many reasons, many obvious reasons, mainly due to financial things. So I will talk about that in a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to go through this. If you are watching on YouTube, you should be able to see me having some stuff to the side, just so you can read it as well. So let's go through it really quick. Quick-ish. So the first section is talking about how American life expectancy significantly lags behind other developed countries. Yes, that is pretty true. We have high rates of chronic physical and mental conditions. However, why do we have this? Let's put on our critical thinking hats here really quick. What do other developed nations have that the United States doesn't? Do they have paid parental leave? Yes, they do. Do they have paid health care where they don't have to worry about going to the doctor and being slammed with a $500 bill? Do they have access to medication where they don't have to worry about having a $2,000 insulin bill every single month? Do they have access to transportation? Yes. So all of these areas, including a lot of other areas such as cleaner air protections, which infamously Trump has rolled back. We'll talk about that in a second as well. So they have all of these protections that care about their people. The US doesn't have that. This is called social determinants of health. The reason why we have all these things, why we are at a huge disparity, is not because of the places that we're going to be talking about in this letter. It's because we don't have access to all these things that actually reduce our stress and actually allow us to live a healthy and happy life. So anyway, it does compare it to other nations in here. So it's saying that we have the highest age standardized incident rate of cancer, specifically in 2021. Then we also had in general an 88% increase in cancer, and 2021 asthma was more than twice as common in the United States than most of Europe, which, by the way, that is pretty directly correlated to having access to healthy air. And clean air is an area that the environmental protections would help. And unfortunately, we just pretty much got rid of a lot of the environmental protections. So, yeah. Okay. Anyway, it goes down to say that this concern applies urgently to America's children. So, an estimated 30 million children, about 40%, had at least one health condition, such as allergies, asthma, or an autoimmune disease. And then it goes on to say autism spectrum disorder now affects 1 in 36 children in the United States, a staggering increase from rates of 1 to 4 out of 10,000 children identified in 1980s. Now, this is one of the first instances of statistical propaganda. That is what it is, and I'm not going to mince words, because it is. So the reason why we have such a staggering increase is not because of we're becoming more autistic as a nation. It's because we're better at identifying it. It's because people are learning that, hey, these differences that I have in operating in this society is real. And then they're able to access treatment and looking for people who can identify what's going on in their bodies. So that's actually what's going on. We're also a lot better because we have evolved as a scientific society in autism. We've evolved to learn more about this. So this also, by the way, is demonizing autistics. Not cool. Not cool at all. The next area that it talks about is these health burdens have continued to increase alongside the increased prescription of medication. For example, in the case of attention deficit disorder / attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which, by the way, it's just attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so that's false. I don't know why they did that. Okay, anyway, over 3.4 million children are now on medication for the disorder, up from 3.2 million children in 2019 to 2020. And the number of children being diagnosed with the condition continues to rise. Now, if you watched my previous, I guess it's not an episode. I actually don't know if I put it on, I might not have put it on the podcast, but it's on YouTube. It is called ADHD, the unknown impacts of ADHD medication, and I go through all of the reasons where ADHD medication actually, and here I'm going to do air quotes, fixes a lot of our metabolic health conditions and differences in our bodies. And it's so incredibly fascinating, and I would highly encourage that you go listen to it. It's incredible how amazing ADHD medication is. It's amazing. Just for a quick understanding here, people with ADHD have abnormal uses of blood in our brain. And then when they go on stimulant medication, these abnormal differences regulate. Isn't that incredible? It's amazing. Plus, On top of that, people with ADHD are at a 240% to 277% increased risk for dementia. It's likely related to how we have abnormal ratios of glutamate in our brain. And then when we compare people who go on medication, that risk disappears, especially if you were on it since a kid. That's incredible. And yeah, it's amazing. That's really all I can say about it. I mean, yes, there's a lot of side effects and a lot of concerns in general. However, there is this amazing aspect of it that a lot of people aren't seeing. And so I just really encourage you to watch it. It's really, really interesting. Anyway, basically, this entire top half of the section is saying, hey, we have a lot of people with ADHD, autism, other mental health conditions, other chronic health conditions in general, and that's bad. And yeah, we don't want a lot of us to have like asthma or cancer or other things like this, because that is not helpful for our bodies. I mean, here, pathologizing autism and ADHD is kind of gross, like saying it's a bad thing, but I digress. Anyway, this is the other part here. What they're saying isn't that it is impactful to the people. Like, they don't talk about how it's impacting the actual people, because when we get to this section, it's when it talks about why this is important. Like, why do we care about this? The first thing that it says, we care about it because 77% of young adults do not qualify for the military, based in large part on their health scores. That is their priority. That is the first thing that they are concerned about. They are not concerned about the health and the illness and the fact that it is completely debilitating for a lot of people. They are concerned that it is impacting how many people can be a part of the military. That is very telling about what this administration is asking. It is looking for people to basically fulfill Trump's desire to be a wartime president. That is what is going on. And again, I'm not going to mince words, because when you look at the reality of life, when you look at the reality of what things are saying in the subliminal messaging, that's what we see. The second aspect here that it says, so the first thing that is important for is because of the military. The second aspect is the fact that we're spending a lot of money on healthcare. So it's not because they care about the health, it's because they care about the military and the economy. Those two are taking precedent over the actual thing that we should care about, which is the health. So, yeah, isn't that just wonderful? But this is where I want to just take a break, talk about why we care about this, because honestly, like I said, it looks amazing on the outside, right? It's saying, let's make America healthy again. And then they sneak these little things in here. They sneak it in where we can't see it. And unless you are a trained person in understanding what's going on, we're just going to be taking the back seat and being like, oh, yes, let's do this. Let's do it. And not understanding what's going on. So, yeah, it is something else. All right, so the next action here is saying, to fully address the growing health crisis in America, we must redirect our national focus in the public and private sectors toward understanding and drastically lowering chronic disease rates and ending childhood chronic disease. This includes fresh thinking on nutrition, physical activity, healthy lifestyles, over-reliance on medication and treatments, the effects of new technological habits, environmental impacts, and food and drug quality and safety. Whew, that's a lot to unpack there. The first thing to say is that we already know. This, again, is another area where it is basically just saying, let's undermine all the research that has actually been done. and pretend it doesn't exist so that we can go in and play the hero. That is exactly what's going on here. Also, I want to emphasize over-reliance on medication and treatments. I don't know about you, but I do trust that my physician has their best interests in mind for me, because they do actually talk about all these other areas before prescribing medication, and that is how most of them have been trained. The thing is, a lot of us have been told by the wellness industry that that's not what's going on. However, when we talk to like actual physicians, they do. They tell us, hey, these are the areas of nutrition that could maybe be helpful for you. I recommend exercising 3 to 4 days a week, preferably making some of it resistance training and some of it cardiovascular training. And they'll also say things like, hey, make sure you're getting enough sleep. And if you're not getting enough sleep, where can we actually help you? So it's not like they're not doing this, because they are. And if you're a physician, I would love for you to comment down there what you've seen, because I've heard a lot of people say, like, they do say these things to their patients, and then their patients are the one who are actually just saying, hey, I just want the medication. I don't want to make any of these lifestyle changes. And so again, this is just a lot of let's poo-poo on the people who know what they're talking about. Make a commission saying, hey, we probably know better than the people who have done literally 12 years of training. And we're going to go through all the research without having any background in reading research and conducting research. And we're going to find things that fit our biases. That's what's gonna happen. Like, let's be clear here. We're searching for our biases. So, anyway, let's keep going down here. So it says, we must restore the integrity of the scientific process by protecting expert recommendations from inappropriate influence and increasing transparency regarding existing data. So this makes me so mad, because we already do this. All right. So whenever a person conducts research, they have to disclose their funding, their potential biases, and other things that could potentially impact their work. They have to. And like, they're trained in figuring out what those biases are and how to make sure they don't influence their work. So first off, we already have these practices in place, and they're getting better with time. Like, as we continue to evolve as humanity, we are getting better at understanding our biases. We're getting better at understanding where we're at in the world and how we can actually make sure that our science is more rigorous. Like, we are doing this. We are continually learning how to conduct better science. That is what we're doing. That is the goal of science. The second part is increasing transparency regarding existing data. Now, let's take a second and think about this, because I don't know. For some reason, I have a feeling, like a memory, of a certain president doing some executive orders that essentially got rid of the transparency of all of this data, specifically in a lot of the, like the CDC, places like that. Oh, couldn't be. Wait. Yeah. You cannot just say that we want to increase transparency regarding existing data while at the same time getting rid of the transparency regarding the existing data. That is called hypocrisy, and it's called making a fake, oh my God. It is called making a fake situation and then coming in and playing the hero. And because there's so much going on, it's going to be really easy for us to forget a lot of this. And then we are going to see, like, oh, he increased the transparency regarding the existing data, But he made this the problem in the first place. He's done this multiple times before. Like, let's talk about TikTok. So he's actually the one who started the whole ban thing. He's the one who started the ball rolling on getting rid of TikTok, and then he came right back, and then he was like, oh my gosh, I love TikTok so much. Let's bring it back. I'm going to be the savior of TikTok. And so many people forgot that he was the one who was actually the one who started the ban in the first place. So we have to be vigilant when we look at things like this. We have to make sure that we are actually looking at the reality instead of just what we're being told, because the reality is that people who are in power and who have a lot of this influence and making a lot of noise and making a lot of cognitive just overload are doing this on purpose to take away our ability to think. That's what's going on. Okay, well, that was a fun little rant. Anyway, the next area here is that they are saying that agencies shall work with farmers to ensure that United States food is the healthiest, most abundant, and most affordable in the world. Yes, let's do this. However, actions speak louder than the words that you are saying. So what are the actions that have been going on? Let's talk about USAID for a second. Trump has been doing an excessive amount of cuts, an excessive amount of things that are detrimental to farmers. And a lot of the farmers are just now realizing what's going on. And honestly, it's horrible. So I grew up in rural Wisconsin. I understand farmers because I lived with them, and a lot of my friends actually still live there and are working on these farms and making sure that we actually have the food to exist in the States. But Trump got rid of a lot of things. With USAID, with the cuts, it buys about $2 billion worth of food from American farmers. When it took that away, not only are we getting more food waste, but it is making a lot of those farmers scramble they don't know what's going to go on for how they can actually survive. Farmers are one of the most amazing people, and they continually get shafted time and time again because they're invisible, because people don't see what they do. And it's just heartbreaking, honestly. Another aspect here is tariffs are really hard for farmers right now. It is making access to a lot of these things that they need to create, like, think tractors for a second. To get access to a lot of this equipment, a lot of it is not made in the States. It's really not. And so they have to outsource it. And they're already paying an exorbitant amount of money to get these. And now it's going to be even more. Another aspect is the Climate Smart program. So a lot of farmers opted into this program, especially the ones down south where it's a little bit easier to implement. So it is a program where they get the ability to monetize carbon neutral benefits, which has a lot of good benefits for their long-term, their long-term ability to produce more food for us, as well as reducing costs in the long term and getting some incentives through monetary means. It's gone now. So many farmers have invested in all of these things, trusting that the government was going to allow this to stay because, of course, it should. It was passed through Congress. It was passed through the Senate. It should be part of what they were promised. And now it's not. And so many of these farmers are now completely in the hole. They have no idea what's going on, and it is terrifying for them. And that should be terrifying for us because they are the backbone of this country. They are the reason why we can eat. We should be supporting them and not taking away. So there is another just aspect where it makes me entirely frustrated because it is saying that we should work with the farmers while at the same time committing actions that are doing the complete opposite and actually harming them. If you didn't know, yes, I care a lot about farmers. I love them so much. They are incredible people. So, all right, so the next section here that I'm going to talk about is the section on what are they actually supposed to be doing. So, this is where a lot of us have been getting more fear. And I personally believe that it is a justified fear because of the track record with RFK Jr. and since he's going to be the head of this commission. So this section is saying, part 2 here, assess the threat that potential overutilization of medication, certain food ingredients, certain chemicals, and certain other exposures pose to children with respect to chronic inflammation or other established mechanisms of disease, using rigorous and transparent data, including international comparisons. So the language here is what's important. It's saying assess the threat. Now, if it was saying assess how potential we see how that's a difference, right? There's a difference between a neutral language and then a non-neutral language. So when we're looking at here, it's not saying, hey, let's just look into all of the data. It's saying we're only going to be looking into the threat. We are going to be looking for data that's going to confirm our cognitive biases. That is what this commission is going to do. It's not going to look into what are some of these amazing potential things that I've talked about in that previous episode. It is going to be talking about how these are threatening to us. And yes, there are some great things here. Of course, I would love for us to look more into food, chemicals, whatever. The thing is, we've already looked into it. That's also the other part. There's a difference between thinking that science hasn't done a thing versus looking at what science has actually done. As a person who has actually read a lot of this literature, as a person who has actually been part of good conversations with real food scientists, with people who are dietitians who actually understand the reality of the research, this is just a political farce to make us think that they are trying to do something for us that's actually already been done before. And this last part that I really want to highlight here, assess the prevalence of and threat posed by the prescription of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, stimulants, and weight loss drugs. I honestly don't know what to say. That is the point where I felt incredibly triggered and fearful. And I'm sure a lot of people who've also read this have also felt that same way, because it does elicit a lot of emotions, especially for a person who has looked at the research or a person who trusts that the other people have looked at the research. So, personally, I haven't looked at antipsychotics. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't need to know this, if I'm honest. Because they have read the research and they know what's going on. But that's the other thing. So this entire just memo or executive order is working to continue to undermine the actual science. Their plan isn't to make America healthier. Their plan is to undermine the trust in modern medicine and place the entire blame on us instead of the actual issue, which is social determinants of health. Their plan is not to look at this and think, okay, wow, there's so much research that has actually been done and that shows the efficacy and shows the safety, and actually we do talk about all of these areas where we could have potential side effects. We have all of this research, and instead of looking at that, they are taking this and saying, we don't trust you. And let's continue to erode the trust in the science and the educators. That's what's going on. They want to put all of the blame on us. They want to put the blame for our chronic health conditions on our ability to eat, on our ability to exercise, on our ability to just be a human, instead of putting the blame on the areas that I outlined before, which are the social determinants of health, which is adequate nutrition and access to this adequate nutrition. It is financial security. That is actually one of the biggest social determinants of health. And you want to know who has been taking away all of the money? It is the oligarchs who are actually in charge of the United States right now. That is what's going on. And they are working on taking more money away from us through this tax proposal that has been done in the Republican Congress. They are working to give more money to billionaires and take away more money from us. Another aspect of social determinants of health is safe and stable housing. Clean air and water, which we talked about, has been getting repealed by the administration, who just doesn't care about the environment. And that is very clear, since we also have a lot of people who are getting fired from the national parks, and we are working to defend the national parks. And there was actually a bill that was introduced to there was a bill that was introduced that is saying, hey, we can actually use our national parks and all this protected land to start drilling for oil. It hasn't passed yet, and I hope it doesn't. It was a very hidden and sneaky place. A lot of people haven't seen it yet. It was introduced about 2 weeks ago. But that should terrify us, because our land is necessary and we should protect it. And they're telling us that we don't care about it. If we don't have protections for land, what do we have anymore? The last aspect, or the last two aspects of social determinants of health, is access to health care, which again they are working to dismantle. They are having, in that tax proposal, decreased funding to Medicaid, which so many people rely on right now, especially people with mental health conditions. They are working to defund that instead of working to defund tax breaks to the billionaires. And the last one is access to health education. Did you know, just access to education in general. In their tax cut for billionaires proposal, the Republicans have also said that maybe we should consider taxing scholarships. So all the people who are trying to get into college and trying so hard to pay for it, which is also already exorbitant, let's tax that so that they can't really actually pay for it. Also, another area that they said that, hey, maybe we should consider is cutting the subsidized loans. Let's make all of the loans unsubsidized so that all the people who apparently, I was on a subsidized loan when I went to college. It was incredibly important because it made sure that I was not accruing interest while I was trying to be educated. But they're trying to take that away. This is all to fund Trump's two agendas: making himself and his buddies more rich, becoming the 1%, and the military. That is what they care about. Do not let yourself be fooled, because that is the truth. That is what's actually happening, and actions speak louder than the words that are in this document. Tax cuts for the wealthy is what is actually going on right now. That is what they are pursuing, and you can read the bill or economist analysis on it if you do not trust me, because I would actually honestly recommend you do that anyway, because you should be reading all of these things and educate yourself and make an informed decision for yourself. But like I said, they are planning to cut Medicaid funding, which is for low-income and disabled people. So again, they are trying to further stigmatize people who are disabled, which is horrible, and decrease the ability that people with low income can actually access healthcare. They are cutting SNAP benefits, which is access to nutrition. So here they are saying, hey, let's make sure that we can have nutrition for everybody, and yet at the same time, let's make sure that the people who are poor can't access it. That's horrible. That is completely immoral. It also is eliminating clean energy incentives, which will increase our energy bills. So not only are we getting less clean energy and less clean air and water because of these initiatives that they are trying to cut, we're going to have higher bills. So it's like a lose-lose situation here. Nothing is good. Policymakers should not have us, the working class, which is basically everybody, and if you don't think you are, you're probably fooling yourself, to shoulder the burden of taxpayer cuts to billionaires. We should not finance tax cuts to billionaires. If that doesn't make you mad, I would recommend thinking about why. Doing a really good internal check. Why do I care more about a billionaire than I care about the people in my community? Why do I think they deserve it instead of the people around me? Anyway, that's one of my moral standings, if you haven't noticed. I sincerely wish and hope that this tax policy does not work, because it is going to make all of our lives so much more difficult, and it is only going to help the billionaires. It is only going to help those. It is not going to make our lives any better. We deserve better. We deserve so much better than what we're getting right now, and we do not deserve to be walked over. We do not deserve to have to pay for the people who already have way too much money. We deserve life. We deserve health, and we deserve so much more than what is going on right now. And if this doesn't make you mad, I don't know what else will. And if it does, then I highly encourage you to call your representative every single day. There is nothing more that we can do besides basically going on strike all day, every day, that is going to help, because they are our last resort right now. Call them every single day. If you didn't watch the Instagram live that AOC did, I highly encourage you do that, because she talked about how Republicans and people who fall more in the conservative line call their constituents every single day. They call them at a completely higher rate than Democrats do, or more liberal people. And I think, honestly, that's a really huge deficit that we should acknowledge, because people with more liberal leaning, we actually tend to be less likely to get actionable. Like, that's actually kind of scientifically researched, and it's important for us to do so. We cannot stand idly by anymore, because the lives of our families are at stake. The lives of the farmers are at stake. The ability to have access to health is at stake, and I encourage you so much to be doing this. There's a lot of great websites out there. 5 Calls is probably one of the most helpful, and I would encourage you to do that. All right, well, thank you so much for watching this complete breakdown of the Make America Healthy Again Commission and how it is actually more like propaganda and less like helpful. So I hope that you were able to get something out of this. Please, again, if you can do something, just give them a call, send an email, because we deserve so much better than what we're getting.